Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Constantine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be talking about a writing genre that comes up in many professional degree programs. That is to say, how to create an action plan. We're going to be looking at a specific assignment drawn from the Doctor of Education Leadership program, but the principles will apply in any other setting where you're giving a context or describing a context, identifying a problem, and coming up with a way to address this problem or to meet the goal, as the case may be. And so even if you're not in that program, if you are looking at writing something like this, it could be a clinical intervention, it could be a process improvement, take a look. If you're new to the Writing Center, we work with students through many different channels, including through webinars such as this, through providing resources such as course paper templates that help do some of the formatting for you and simplify the process of making your text look the way it should. We have writing consultations where you can sign up for asynchronous times or real times, depending on your preference and schedule, and many other resources available through the Online Writing Center website. The basic process for an appointment is that you sign up for a time, and using the WC Online schedule system, that by the time that rolls around, you submit your paper to us via Canvas, and then if it's a asynchronous appointment, we send you feedback via email, generally within 24 hours, and if it's a real-time appointment, you get that in real time in the session at the scheduled time. Now, on our webinar guide page, we have many webinars, and more adding every term. And something that's very helpful to know is that we have a tabbed and sorted guide by the course program. So if you're, say, in the leadership program, you can head on over there and see all the webinars that we have that have direct tie-ins with classes in your program. And you can see on the slide here that we even have it labeled in the order for the different classes. So, for example, the annotated bibliography assignment that you do in Leadership 701 Week 3, we've got a video for that, and if you were to scroll down, you would see even more tie-ins. So a great thing to do is to check when you start preparing for an assignment to see if we have a tie-in resource, watch that, and then read through the materials with that kind of introduction in mind. You'll see me referring to our APA course paper template later. We do have a YouTube channel where you can browse many of our videos as in a on-the-go format, as well as a blog where we explore. Now in this webinar, we're going to be focusing on three things. First, understanding the components or elements of a strong action plan. Then we'll look specifically at the Leadership 741 Week 6 course project to write an action plan. And we'll finish with the discussion of how to apply these principles in the outlining and drafting process. How to organize and set up this paper so that you're writing exactly what you need to. No more, no less, coming in within the parameters, the assignment guidelines, and being able to do this in a reasonably concise amount of time because, of course, we all have many commitments. So let's talk about those components of a strong action plan. A strong action plan should have one or more specific goals. If it's goals like solve world hunger, that is very big, overarching, and general. It's hard to show progress on that because the thing is so large. Now, if you were to break it down and say, okay, we are going to try and reduce the rate of malnutrition in this specific area by X%, then that's easier to understand and meet. A strong action plan should also outline all the steps needed to achieve your goals, however many you're setting for this particular plan. You should have a time frame for achieving them. So a way of seeing, are we on track? Are we making progress? Or do we need to recalibrate or redesign? And a good action plan process should be showing you how to develop this. Now, you'll find a number of different ways of describing that. So let's look at a couple. One is the 3-point action plan creation process. We start with preparing, implementing, and then leading from that, or leading through the process. Now that is a little bit general. It's good for the higher level planning, but ask some questions about, okay, well, how specifically are we going to do these things? And so we might look instead at the 5-step process, which is beginning with making sure you have SMART goals. It may have been a little while since you took the course where we reviewed those, so we'll come back to those in a moment. Make sure you have the SMART goals. Make sure that you prioritize which tasks should be done or should be done first. Set a timeline for doing this. Identifying important resources needed or helpful for achieving these goals, and tracking the progress. So this is a little bit more specific, a little bit more intricate than the 3-point process. But let's move up to the 7-step process. And this has us starting by defining the problem, collecting and analyzing the data, clarifying and prioritizing the problems. So often this is going to involve taking some subset of the larger problem that you're going to be focusing on. As an example, I was a U.S. Fulbright Scholar to Madagascar. Madagascar is a big country with 26 million people. It's about as tall north to south as the east coast of the United States, from Maine down to Florida. That's big. And so you might say, okay, the problem is famine and malnutrition. And this is going to have different responses in different parts of the country because, as you might expect, in something so large, there are a lot of differences, whether we're talking weather, talking crops, talking food security, potential climate impacts, and other things like that. So clarify and prioritize which section you're going to focus in on. Write a goal statement for each of the solutions that you want to bring to those problems. And then you create the action plan for implementing those solutions. Monitor and evaluate, okay, is this working? Is this doing what we set out to do? And then either you succeed, we've met our goal, so we restart with a new problem, or we go back and refine the old problem and say, okay, well, that didn't work, or that didn't do what we wanted it to, or we're moving to a new location, all of which are potential ways of refining your approach to the original or the larger problem. Now, the SMART goals, just as a quick recap. SMART refers to goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Now, let's take a different problem scenario. Let's say that you are aiming for a superintendent position in the school district. And we take stock of what the issues are. And there are many different things that can come up, but let's just say that for this example, you're working in a school district where there is an achievement gap, where some group, possibly all the students, are not achieving the way you want it to. So specific, you could just say, oh, all students will succeed. Yes, but what does that mean? Does that mean graduate? Does that mean get scores of a certain amount or pass a certain threshold on different exams? Does that mean that the students themselves will report that they got this? Does it mean that your dropout rate declines? All of these are different specific goals, and while you might pursue many of them together, we want them to be discretely identified because you will work towards them in different ways and with different resources. And if they're in different priorities, you will allocate resources differently. So goals should be specific. Measurable. So there must be some way of our telling what's going on. Are these actions being undertaken? Are they succeeding? Are they doing what we want or what we need? Achievable. So, if you have a school district that is underperforming, a great leadership and instructional team can do a lot, but they can't do everything overnight. So, if you said, oh, all students will be passing in 1 month, that is a very rapid time. Now, you can look at it and say, okay, we want to improve by X amount per year or per term or per 3-year period or 4-year period to be able to watch a whole class go through high school, say. But the point is that it be achievable And also, I should say, achievable given your professional commitments. Because if you are proposing something for a school district that you work in, and you're like, okay, so this is achievable, it's going to take us 10 years. I'm not saying that you can't write an action plan for that, but if it's one that you plan on implementing yourself right now, just keep in mind, will you be able to see all of this through? Or is it better or easier to measure and track and gauge whether things are working or not if we set the frame of evaluation and intervention to be somewhat more concise? Relevant. There are many things that you can pursue that are not important to your stakeholders. I will give an example from a school district that my family lived in. The school district embarked on a very expensive plan where they rebranded. So they repainted the school buildings exteriors, they redid the signs, they ordered new sports equipment. All the athletes had to get new gear and stuff. And yeah, it did look nice, but none of the parents were really interested in that because there are many other things at the school that were underfunded. And making it look really nice for photos was certainly something that they achieved that goal. But did the stakeholders like the students and the parents think that it was relevant to them? No. So you want your goals to be relevant to the people that you care about, the stakeholders for whatever organization or bounded system you are preparing the action plan for. And time-bound, meaning that this isn't just open-ended, that there is some beginning and end, some way of measuring, okay, where things are now and where will they be, or what point will we be making our evaluation. And that's particularly important if we are looking at the end of the 7-step problem management here, where you have restart with a new problem or refine the old problem. So if we have addressed something, then we want to be able to deploy resources accordingly to go after other priorities. Alright, so now let's take a look at the LEAD 741 Week 6 course project, the action plan. Now this is one of those accumulating assignments. It is building on material that has been written earlier in the course. So there'll be a little bit of a preamble as we go through some of that. So this is coming from the Human Resource Development course, Leadership 741. And the instructions begin with a preamble that you will turn in the completed report, including your revised assessment from week 3. And then there's a checklist for that, and that the details for this is a second bullet on the slide. The details for what you're doing are not included in the assignment rubric because of the size and scope of this, but there's a specific course project description page that goes into greater detail, so we'll make sure to look at that. Then we have a bunch of errata, various comments about the assignment that aren't specifically saying here is what you should be including, but things, various bits and pieces of information that is either helpful to keep in mind or listing details that don't really fit it somewhere else. So we see here, while there is not a strict page limit for the final report, we value concise writing and clear signposting. A table of contents, introductory and concluding paragraphs, headings, subheadings. The length could vary a great deal depending on how you format the action plan, but the body of the paper shouldn't exceed 15 pages by much, if any, not counting appendices. So this is saying that you should be using the different headings. There should be a clear introduction and conclusion. You should have a table of contents, which is probably something that you haven't used in the program so far. So we'll make sure to talk about that. We have a guideline that 15 pages is a good target maximum length. Not saying it's a strict one, but 15 pages of body text. So that's not counting the references, not counting the title page, not counting any appendices that you have supplements. You may need to put some elements in appendix in order to keep the narrative concise and flowing. If a good portion of the action plan is a table, then it might be fairly succinct, but if it is an outline, it could be longer. Most likely you will need to use some combination of a table, narrative, and bulleted list or multi-level outline. So this is saying that you should be using different ways of displaying information to present it more clearly and concisely. So that could be a table, could be an outline, it could be putting a whole bunch of supplemental information away in an appendix, so it's there to refer to, but doesn't disrupt the main flow of the paper. Some general notes: write with your audience in mind, your instructor who doesn't know the organization, and who will also look for your knowledge of various HRD approaches and activities, along with the solid foundation of scholarly literature, and the leadership team of the organization who may value succinctness even more than your instructor. So be very direct to the point while grounding the things that you're doing with references to the literature. All right, let's look at that next sentence here. It is important to describe your process for developing the action plan using the steps provided in the instructions, in addition to presenting a table of your resulting action plan. So this is saying you need to be documenting why this is being done the way it is. And that could be saying, okay, I'm following the guidelines of X. This is a general note about APA style, especially because this may be something that is using various things that are new to you. Now, there is a particular house rule here, listed here. For references, single space within each reference and double space between. So that is not how core APA rules work for spacing the references. So, but this is listed here in the requirements here. So this is what we call a house rule, meaning, okay, in my house you follow my rules. So you'll find lots of things like this if you're, say, submitting to a journal for publication, when they have particular ways that you want to make things look. And so my suggestion would be to make sure that you apply this custom formatting for these sections. There's also a note about having outlines being single-spaced. Again, that's not the standard APA 7 approach, but your instructor has told you clearly that they would like you to do that, so all right, house rule, we'll make sure it gets done. The table formatting, we'll talk about that later. But they do note, if APA formatting of a table results in a lack of clarity, modify as necessary for clarity, and make a brief note of the modification so that the reader knows you know how to format a table according to APA. So that's very helpful. They want to know that you are making a conscious digression if you are digressing from the core APA rules for table formatting. We have a reminder about general precepts of APA writing style. Active voice is more than less, to make sure that everything's clear, succinct, direct, and specific. And as you can see, the rubric is referring to the project description. Now, there are some detailed action plan elements, and this is giving you one possible way, because as noted in the early instructions, you can use a different one if you so choose, but you'll just need to specify what it is and why that was being used. So here we have, okay, step 1, identify your overall goal. And there's a specific note here to have SMART objectives. So again, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, irrelevant, and time-bound. To be precise, using positive language. Okay, so don't go off on rants about how, you know, this group has not been performing or doing their job. You know, let's state what's going on, and then let's see how to move forward with that productively. Start with an action verb to ensure that things are focused on that. So they give you some examples here: complete, publish, investigate, propose, revise, plan, install. And that helps us see, okay, what needs to be done. Also being asked to identify specific steps to follow to meet the objectives and achieve the goals. And from that, specifically identify individual tasks in the order of priority. Okay, what should be done first? What is the most important here? And that if it's a particularly large objective, that you should be breaking it into smaller tasks so that it's easier to track that they're being done, and that you're not feeling like you're just chipping away at a large boulder, that you can see, okay, we did that. progress. Continuing. Prioritize these tasks. Are there any that are subordinate in terms of this must be done to achieve another thing? And so you might possibly have a different order to the priority than you come up with originally when identifying specific steps. There might be something that has a long lead time. For example, if you're trying to improve your math test scores and you're talking about different things, where do you hire a math teacher? Well, if you're going to hire a math teacher, you probably want to do it before the start of the school year. Hiring the last day is not so effective for that school year. So, if there's something where this must be done before that for it to have a strong effect, let us know. Now, here we have a section that a lot of people will run into and say, oh gosh, this is a lot of things to do. I don't know where to begin. But if you break it down into these things, it's actually very easy to do, because we are given a list of 3 things to identify: challenges, barriers, self-defeating tendencies, and then to label them with this system of 4 things. Is it action? And is it something where we are reframing in this, where we say, okay, what can we do with this? So if we say, okay, morale is terrible. Okay, well, there's a lot of room to improve. If morale is at rock bottom, that's not great, but it also means that when it gets so low, there's a lot of room for improvement and a lot of small things that will help. That if, our staff was 99% satisfied, getting that last 1% will be really hard, but, we can go from 10 to 20 much easier, much faster. Choose which challenges you want to address. Okay, there are things that you might be able to control but aren't important or aren't a priority yet. Is it going to be something that you ignore, or it's just out of your control? So, for example, if you're working in a school district that is economically depressed, you're not going to solve the economics problems directly. It's something that's out of your control. And so we say, all right, that's something that other people can work on. And by taking this out of our focus, we can look at the things that we can influence. And are there things that are overcomable? And hence, we can say, okay, here's our strategy for addressing that. All right, who can help you? Now, if we were to go back to the earlier slide talking about the teams, identify who can help you. This is basically looking at our resource list. And if this is an action plan that's focused on you, then you have a broad set of your social and professional networks you could potentially be drawing on. Number 6, resources you will need. Step 7, milestones and a realistic timeline. So that's probably going to be a bulleted outline, because it's just one of the most concise and clear ways of laying out that sort of information. Step 8, develop a plan to monitor, evaluate, and update the plan. So this is getting us to the last 2 items on the 7-step process. How do you tell that things are working, and if necessary, change what you're doing, either because you've completed the goal or you're not completing the goals. And there's an example given of keeping a diary or logbook of activities, which is one way you can do it. You'd also have periodic reviews, deep listening session, or have assessments post-implementation. Usually if you're going to be doing an assessment, you want to do both pre and post to see what things were before you started and what they were after your plan took place, after the intervention. Now let's move to the question of outlining and drafting. And for this, you're going to want a copy of our APA course paper template. So if you're watching this on video, go ahead and download that now and pause the video until you've got it. Now, I have here a copy of the APA course paper template here, And I'm going to just start by filling in a couple placeholders. Now make sure whatever you pick for the title that it matches what you put on this page here. And I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so you can see a couple things more quickly. So we know that there's going to be an introduction here because the instructions ask for that. What the other headings are going to be, we'll get that when we come to it. But we know that the instructions have said that there should be an introduction paragraph, one or more, and a concluding paragraph, one or more. So we have that and some number of sections or headings within there. Now, we've also are going to have references. We'll just take out these placeholders here. And there's that note to have them be single-spaced. And it's internally single-spaced. And we'll talk about what that looks like in a moment, how to make it happen easily. We might also have some appendices, because that's something that's been mentioned here. So I'm adding a page break. You can do that a couple ways. Command-Enter on a Mac, Control-Enter if you're on a PC. And that will move things to a new page. And you might have one or more appendix. We'll call this Appendix A for now. And we'll say have Appendix B2. So Appendix A, we'll make that an APA Level 1 heading. You see I use this bullet here. You can also pop out the Styles pane here. And then I'm going to add another page break and do the same thing for Appendix B. I'm going to give it the APA Level 1 style. So now it shows up there. Now, there's another element here that is indicated and that we're going to put before the main body of the paper, and that was to include a table of contents. So we have our table of contents here. We're going to make this be centered and bolded, but we don't want it to be showing up in the table of contents itself. This is its own element. Now the table of contents, if you're using our APA course paper template and you go to the References tab here, there's this button here in the upper left-hand corner, Table of Contents. And that gives you a way of inserting variously styled tables of contents. In our case, we want custom table of contents and just use from template here with 3 levels here. And we see that we have the things we have headings here showing up already. Now we'll come back talk about how to update that a little bit after we get some more headings. Let's take a look back at some of the items that will be in this action plan that we know we need headings for. Now, for those of you who are more reading learners, I've included step-by-step instructions here for how to apply the heading styles, as you saw me do for the APA Level 1 headings there, for the appendix, for the conclusion, things like that. I've also included instructions for how to add the table of contents. And I have here instructions for updating it that you'll see us use in practice after we go through the next step. All right, so if we scroll back here to the things for the action plan, we have the list of key elements here. Step 1, overall goal. Okay, so let's go ahead and add a section here. You can number it. That makes it a little easier to track. Nothing wrong with that. Step 1, overall goal. Okay. And step 2, specific steps to meet the objectives. Okay. That in APA Level 1 heading. because these are all at the same level of organization. Step 3, prioritize tasks. So we'll call this step 3, task by priority. And you can call it a number of different things, but it should be descriptive and reasonably concise. And this tells us, oh, there's going to be a list of tasks in here. It's going to be sorted by priority. Okay. Challenges, barriers, and self-defeating. All right. Got that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and make these AP Level 1 headings. And here we have the monitor, evaluation, and okay. So now we have a step where we can go back in and see, okay, which of these has specific things that we could add. Okay, so let's see, the overall goal, and then SMART objectives. Oh, all right, so here, all right, so that's going to be an AP Level 2 heading, because it's a subheading of this section. We need at least 2 of that level. Let's see, what is it that you want to accomplish with the successful implementation? And so we might subdivide this into, okay, we have the SMART objectives, and delineate this into, okay, now this isn't the only way that you can sort this. It's a way of doing it, but I like to say, okay, here's what we want to do. Here's why it's important for doing that. Here are objectives to getting there. And then now, okay, the specific steps related to that. And we know with this that there's going to be some level of objective 1, objective 2, etc. And that each of these is going to have a breakdown of, let's go ahead and turn this into a bulleted list for now for planning purposes. And that per these being SMART, we're going to have this breakdown here that we can add. And so if we go through this in the planning section, it'll be much easier to write this up as a paragraph because, oh hey, we've already listed these things. All right, now specific steps that should be fairly doable. We have, okay, individual tasks and order them by priority. Break down any large objectives into smaller tasks. Okay, yeah. Prioritize. Okay, that's going to be listing most important. This one here, we have 3 categories. All right, so again, we're going to apply the next heading level, and so we're using AP Level 1 for the larger headings. Here we'll use AP Level 2 because this is a subheading of this. Who can help? That should be, just start with a list. Needed resources, same thing, you can start with a list. Here, timeline. Okay, so timeline, this is one of those things where I'm just going to put in some dummy data so that you can see how some of the formatting is supposed to go. Now, if we look back at the slides here, it says, okay, set the milestones and decide on a realistic timeline to achieve your overall goal. Okay, so within these, list any important actions or events that are happening. And also, if there's something that is a milestone, mark that, like. Now, if we go back here, we're looking at the guidelines here. Okay, if using bulleted lists or multi-level outline for a portion of paper, single space the outlines. That's a house rule. So we're going to go ahead, and since this outline is being created to fill in here, go ahead and we can change this to single spacing. And there are a number of different ways to do that, but in our case we'll use the line and paragraph spacing button here and set that to single space. And anything that we add to this timeline will also be following that. Alright, so it's always good to remind yourself that something is going to be there if it's not the normal. So we're going to add a little marginal comment here. And that way you have just a reminder to check that before you submit the paper. Now, let's go ahead and look back at the table of contents now. Now, this table of contents, one of the reasons we've been using those heading styles is that it makes it very easy to dynamically update this. And by dynamically update, I mean to be able to click on this. So right-click or control-click if you're on a Mac, select Update Field, update entire table, and you now see all of those headings that we've added are here with the page numbers automatically calculated and added. So each time we add a new heading, we can update the table of contents and it will show up here. Each time the page numbers change, we can update it and that will then be reflected here. So it's a huge time saver versus counting all this and entering it in manually. Okay, so let's take a look now at the task where you might be putting in a table. So let's look at those slides again. So we have here this note if you're using a table and you need to modify the APA style to make a note about that. So let's put together a table here to show what this should look like. So if you're adding a table in APA style, it's going to have a couple elements. So this is what we call the table label. It's got the number. It should be bolded. Then we have the title of the table itself. In this case, we'll call this the list of key personnel supplying help. In this case, you see we have got the table label, we've got the number, we have the title of the table. Now we're going to add the table itself. So you can go to Table, Insert Table, and then it'll ask you for a couple parameters. Let's start with 3 columns and let's say 11 rows. Now we're going to need to label each of these. Name, role, special skills. You can have whatever categories you feel are helpful here. But whatever we put in here, and I'm just going to type in some names. Let's go with and one more name for good measure. So one of these things that will come up is question of, is there a logical order for these names being here, what they are? And we'll come back to that in a moment. Now, we have some names here that right now do not have a clear order. A clear order would be like if they were sorted by first name or sorted by last name. Right now they appear to be random order. Now if the role gives a clear sorting, okay, that's fine. So for example, if we went and put things this way, okay, so we see they're all administrators, but you know, still these wouldn't be quite alphabetical. So if you were sorting things like that, it might be helpful to go ahead and make sure that it did follow a clear order. So now we see, okay, well, they're sorted by last name. Now, focus less on the specifics here and more on the illustrating different parts of the tables. And special skills, we'll fill that in later. We just want some stuff here to look at this table and how it's formatted. Because in APA style, tables should normally have only a few lines. So the easiest way is to start by setting this to none. Then you can go ahead and then add lines at the top and bottom, like so, and then a line underneath the header row. So this is now an APA compliant table. We have just those lines above and below the heading row and at the very bottom. Now, if we look at this instruction, modify as necessary for clarity. So something that you sometimes see, especially if something is going to be used as a report, is to add color shading. And we can do that by, again, going to Borders and Shading. So I selected this, right-click, Control-click if you're on a Mac, Borders and Shading, and I can go ahead and add, okay, make this a light. And now we see this different banding of, okay, there are 3 different rows standing out there. Now, you could get away with 2. If you feel that it's even more clear if you have a different color for each thing, then okay, we'll go to shading and let's give that a light pink. And so now there's no doubt that there are 3 specific groups. It's reinforced, it's made more clear by having those color bands here. So if you're doing this, if you're adding a additional piece of formatting for clarity that doesn't fit within the core APA rules, then we have, okay, so we have an explanatory note saying that this is something that's added above and on top of the APA style. All right, now we've talked about that. What about references? Now, here's a case where I'm just going to go ahead and paste in some references so we can show how to do that. So these aren't coming from the specific assignment, this is just for illustrative purposes. So I have grabbed some references from another document that I have pasted in here. And now let's go ahead and review what the instructions tell us about references. For references, single space within each reference and double space between. So this is, again, another house rule. And you could reformat this all manually, but there's a better way. So here in the references section, you'll see that these here, we can apply our global APA references style, and that makes sure you have the hanging indent and the spacing. And so it was formatted correctly to begin with, but now that we've applied that style, I can go ahead and modify the style here. So if you don't have the styles window open, go first to the home button on the ribbon, click on Styles pane, and then here where it says APA reference, click on that so it's applied to all these references we have selected. Now we're going to modify the style. And it just gives us a little preview here. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this to be single spaced, but if we go to this menu here, go to paragraph, and indents and spacing, we're going to say after 12 point, which will be adding basically an extra break after. And so you see that these are now automatically organized that way. So any references that we add here We'll also have single spacing within the entries as requested by the instructions, and while having a double space gap between. So that's a way to help make sure that this looks the special way it's being asked for in these instructions. All right, now there's a lot of stuff that you can do here, but the point here is to create an outline that will help guide your work, that will help you do all the things you need and see what you need to do at each step. And so just start filling in this outline as you go, and before you know it, you will have a pretty good guide for writing up a 15-page paper. If you have any questions, please feel free to send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu to sign up for an appointment or check out the many resources on the Online Writing Center website. So with that, let's just do a brief recap. We looked at the elements of a strong action plan. We looked at the specific assignment instructions here, and then we talked about how to implement those in an outline and drafting document, including how to implement the custom formatting being requested. And just as one last step, make sure before you submit this to go ahead and first get rid of any comments that you have. And it's often helpful to zoom out to be able to see all these different things and see, okay, all right, update an entire table. Great, got my page numbers up to date and current. Make sure that if there are any comments, which you can see popping out there, make sure that you delete any comments, so you can go to delete thread when you're done with that, but keep those in as reminders until you are getting ready to submit. And again, if we wanted to take this out, I just say click on these button and delete thread. All right, feel free to join us again. Catch you later.